भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयामदेवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवांसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ब्रह्मानन्दं परमसुखदं केवलं ज्ञानमूर्तिं द्वन्द्वातीतं गगनसदृशं तत्त्वमस्यादिलक्ष्यम् एकन्नित्यं विमलमचलं सर्वदी साक्षिभूतं भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तन्नमामि। यस्यान्तर्नादिमध्यं न हि करचरणं नामगोत्रं न सूत्रं नो जातिर्नैव वर्णं न भवति पुरुषो नो नपुंसो न च स्त्री नाकारो निर्विकारो न जननमरणं नास्ति पुण्यं न पापं नो तत्त्वं तत्त्वमेकं सहजसमरसं सद्गुरुं तन्नमामि। चिन्मयो नाम रूपस्य आनन्दो वै स्वभावतः वेदगीता समुद्धर्ता ज्ञानयज्ञव्रते स्थितः चिन्मयं जीवनं यस्य मरणं यस्य चेतना ज्ञानदानं धृतिर्यस्य तस्य पादौ भजाम्यहम्। समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्। अजमपि जनियोगं प्रापदैश्वर्ययोगात् अगति च गतिमत्तां प्रापदेकं ह्यनेकं विविधविषयधर्मग्राहिमुग्धेक्षणानां प्रणतभयविहन्तृ ब्रह्म यत्तन्नतोऽस्मि। अतीतः पन्थानं तव च महिमा वाङ्मनसयोर् अतद्व्यावृत्यायं चकितमभिदत्ते श्रुतिरपि सकस्य स्तोतव्यः कतिविधगुणः कस्य विषयः पदे त्वर्वाचीने पतति न मनः कस्य न वचः। Hari Om friends, we have started this sixth query with an introduction to the sixth query, and we have almost covered all paras except the last one. I think first four paras are covered. The fifth one is balanced. Now I'll not ask anyone whether there are any questions. In case you have questions, please raise your hands only. Now on fifth para, I'll just read out. Ultimately, this section is addressed to those who have understood the earlier 5 sections and have practiced intelligently the methods of meditation prescribed so far. then alone will they be able to start on the pilgrimage of subjective quest as indicated in this bold and courageous scheme of inquiry. Now it is suggested as a summary of this introduction, it is suggested that those who have already understood these last earlier 5 questions, mainly 5 queries, and have also practiced to some extent the upasanas or meditations that are recommended therein. For them is this last query. They will be able to appreciate and then proceed on their path to self-perfection. So herein is a suggestion. So naturally, it is a very systematic query that are put up. All the 6 students, though we are referring as students, they are Brahmajnanis and they are not ordinary students. Then if they are Brahmajnanis, why they have come at all to the teacher Pippalad? It is now they are the knowers of Brahman. Now they want to seek Parabrahman. In fact, if you see our first starting point only, this is all well said. The first or second mantra. The first mantra says, Ete Brahmaparaha. They are devoted to Brahman. They consider Brahman as the greatest or the highest. Ete Brahmaparaha. Then they are Brahmanishtaha and Param Brahma Anveshamanaha. Now they have come to inquire about Parabrahman. So already they are Brahmajnanis, Brahmanishta, Brahmapara, but now the last lap in their realization is the supreme ultimate truth. This ultimate truth being one without a second, they are now approaching to start with a starting query, the first query. From where these all things and beings come, from where they come, the first query. But all are intelligent, all are Brahmajnanis, but they don't hurry in asking questions in any haphazard way. The first question first, because here you will find that so far the question raised by the 6th question raised by the student, he was so far silent, listening to all others' queries. It was silent because he was intelligent enough to wait for his turn. It is not at any time he could put any type of question. So when all the preliminary questions are over, the last and the crowning question is put up here by the 6th student, which we will go through now. But this being the case, it is necessary that we should be aware of the line of thinking that is developed through 5 questions and how it ended with the 6th question, which is the extreme, the other end of this. So as Swamiji has said in the introduction, it's a cream of all the questions. This is the cream. So this is therefore only at a proper time when all other questions are asked and their answers cleared, that now the student is asking the question. So therefore it is expected that the students have already gone through the earlier 5 questions, they have understood their answers, and now they are ready to receive the answer for the 6th question. So here we can see quickly, the first question was, Bhagavan kuto hava imah prajaha prajayante. Whence are the creatures born? What is their source of birth? This was the first question. So starting with the world, the inquiry starts with the outer world. Even overlooking the inquiry of the outer world, if somebody proceeds on his personal level and even progresses up to the level of the state of meditation that he reaches, and there if he experiences his true nature as pure consciousness, the meditation over, he will open his eyes and in front he will see the world. Then naturally the question will come to him, what is this world? Who has created this world? I have not created this world. His world of OET has already wound up and withdrawn from that. He entered into his, his exercise of meditation and he got the benefit. But now when he opens the world, his eyes, he sees the world in front. So naturally the query has to come. By just going at the personal level within, he cannot escape the world. Because after meditation, he has to interact with the world. He is not at all 24 hours he is going to meditate. Therefore, with this in view, the first question is related to the world. And there, all these things and beings, how they are created, how they are born, from where they are born. Whence is the question. So their source is inquired. And then the answer begins and starts with the, from prana onwards, it starts how Prajapati created all that. Then the second query is the why, how many factors or devas, in other words, how many factors are supporting these living beings? They are created all right, now they are further to be sustained. How they are supported? Who are the forces? What are the forces that support these creatures or created beings? So this was the second question. Then the third question was, whence has the prana come? This is the main question. So in the second query, all prana and its functions and its various activities have been discussed. Now from where this prana has come? The main. When he asks the source of prana, he enters into the actual world of spirituality. The source of prana is pure consciousness. And when he asks this question, he enters the spiritual realm. So thus from world, the creatures, their source of creation, and who are the forces or supports or factors that support the creatures. Then from where this prana has come? This is the important question which starts with this query. Then the third one, and now the fourth one is, what are those who sleep? Who are those when a person goes to bed? Who are those who sleep? Who are those who are awake when others sleep? There are some who are awake. Then who are those who dream? Then who experiences happiness? All these are the questions which are related to the individual now. The outer world, their source of creatures, and then how the pranas are functioning, their details of prana working. And now it says, who is asleep when person goes to bed? When person falls asleep, who goes to sleep? Who keeps alive? And who dreams? Then to whom is this happiness? Who experiences happiness? And such questions are asked, which give us the idea about detailing of the individual, and is going through three states of the equipment according to the equipment, the waking, dream, and deep sleep. So these three states, they are coming and going, etc. All this working has been taken into consideration in this third one. In the fourth one, in the fifth one, we have seen this fourth one. The fifth one, the query is about what happens to those who, or where do these people go after their death when they have performed some upasana related to Om. So having performed the Omkar upasana for lifelong, throughout their life, where they go after the death. So then the results of upasanas at different levels are described by meditating on A, then U, then M, then collectively Om, followed by silence. So all these are described. So details of upasanas are described in this. And now we come to the sixth query, which is not yet put up, but we have indicated that it is regarding the Purusha, the conscious being, with its 16 parts. And in our discussion related to the introduction, we have seen that the first part is prana itself. We'll find that from prana onwards, the entire world is finite, subject to limitations. And once the individual is involved in that, thereafterwards he is tied and bound to this world of names and forms. So this aspect is actually being here now discussed as 16 parts of the conscious being, the self-conscious being or Purusha. This we have, this was the last para of introduction to sixth query. And that was saying that the section is addressed to those who have understood the earlier 5 sections and have practiced intelligently the method of meditation prescribed so far. Then alone they will be able to start on the pilgrimage of subjective quest, as indicated in this bold and courageous scheme of inquiry. So when we started with the source of prana, the question came from where the prana comes. From there onwards, the spirituality begins. So all the discussions related to that onwards, the third query onwards, the third and fourth go in details about the world and the individual and its different states, etc. And then the fifth one is with upasana, the Omkar upasana and its results. Now we are with the sixth one. So with this, the introduction part of sixth query is over. So now we are proceeding for the first Brahmana of the sixth query. Shall we start? Yes. अथ हैनं सुकेश भारद्वाज पप्रच्छ अथ हैनं सुकेश भारद्वाज पप्रच्छ भगवन् हिरण्यनाभः कौसल्यो राजपुत्रः कौसल्यो राजपुत्रः मामुपेत्यैतं प्रश्नमपृच्छत षोडशकलं भरद्वाज पुरुषं वेत्थ तमहं कुमारमब्रुवम् नाहमिमं वेद यद्यहमिममवेदिशम् कथं तेनावक्ष्यमिति समूलो वा एषः परिशुष्यति योऽनृतम् अभिवदति तस्मान्नार्हाम्यनृतं वक्तुम् सतूष्णीं रथम् आरुह्य प्रव्राज तन्त्वा पृच्छामि क्वासौ पुरुष इति अथ हैनं सुकेश भारद्वाजः पप्रच्छ भगवन् हिरण्यनाभः कौसल्यो राजपुत्रः मामुपेत्यैतं प्रश्नमपृच्छत षोडशकलं भरद्वाज पुरुषं वेत्थ तमहं कुमारमब्रुवम् नाहमिमं वेद यद्यहमिममवेदिशम् कथं तेनावक्ष्यमिति समूलो वा एषः परिशुष्यति योऽनृतम् अभिवदति तस्मान्नार्हाम्यनृतं वक्तुम् सतूष्णीं रथम् आरुह्य प्रव्राज तं त्वा पृच्छामि क्वासौ पुरुष इति. This is for us the longest mantra, a larger mantra, where it concerns a lot of things to be considered in the beginning itself. Before he asks the query, he is describing the cause for asking this query. So we'll see the translation of this all. Thus, Sukesha, son of Bharadwaja, questioned him, O Bhagavan, the prince of Kosala, Hiranyanabha, once came to me and questioned, O Bharadwaja, do you know the Purusha of 16 parts? I said to the youth, I do not know him. If knew him, why should I not tell you? He who tells that which is not true is dried up verily, root, stem, and branch. Therefore, I dare not utter falsehood. Having ascended his car, he went away in silence. That I ask you, where is that Purusha located? So at the last the question comes, where is that Purusha with 16 parts located? This is the question. The sixth question is, where is that Purusha with 16 parts located? And before that, why or how he comes to ask this question to the teacher, he gave a story behind that. Now we will see the first paragraph. The general meaning, translation of the mantra we have already seen. Now we'll go to the first paragraph. The sixth disciple, who has been sitting silently all this while, now comes forward in this section to clear his doubt. His question, directly put, would look simple. For all that he wants to know is, where is the Purusha with the 16 parts located? But here we have a description of the whole circumstances under which the student got this doubt. In that, in giving the genesis of his doubt, we are tempted to believe that Mother Shruti had perhaps in her mind a secondary intention. That is, she wanted to indicate that there were among the seekers, even in those days, some who were more talkative than what was necessary or good for them. Do not argue against this theory. You will then only be justifying my theory. Now, first of all, before going into the details of this mantra, Swamiji has taken up for discussion this point that why he has to say the entire genesis of how he has arrived to this question. What are the circumstances that made him ask these questions now with the teacher? So these details he is giving. Now, first, immediately, the first statement that is important is the starting one. The sixth disciple, who has been sitting silently all this while, now comes forward in this section to clear his doubt. So just now we have discussed this point that the student is intelligent enough to wait for his turn for asking the question. The question is related to a new portion now, and already in a sequence, starting with the things and beings that constitute our outer world, from their creation, from where, what is the source of their creation? This is the starting query. Then with them, how they are sustained, what are the supporting factors, etc. Then when it is related to prana, etc., from where the prana has come. So then we entered into the spiritual aspects of this query, and there we discussed the individual different states of waking, dream, deep sleep, etc. Then came the upasana. All this is something like a sequential thought development reaching towards the climax of spirituality. The ultimate spiritual question is about the Purusha. We have already seen that this Purusha is considered as the supreme. This is the supreme being. And regarding this, he has heard that there is a Purusha with 16 parts. So he is asking that question. Here, therefore, he waited for his turn. This is very important. When we are going through a graded portion, first come first. Whatever is the para under discussion, all questions related to that could be discussed first before we go to the next one. Likewise, here he waits for his turn and finally he asks this question. Now, the important first statement in this is his question, the second sentence, his question directly put would look simple, for all that he wants to know is where is the Purusha with the 16 parts located. So where is the Purusha located? The Purusha with 16 parts. So not the location of parts, it is the location of Purusha. And 16 parts, it is adjective, detailing. So here is the main question. The sixth question is worded here in simple terms, and that is given here. It is the important statement for the first paragraph, which presents to us the sixth query. And then we are now here, it is discussed what is the intention of Shruti, Mother Shruti, in giving the story behind this question. What made him ask this question to the teacher? The story. And such a big story, after having narrated, then he asked the question. Therefore, I ask you this question. So, what is the idea behind it? So, generally, listening to all that long discussion or long this Brahmana, such the lengthy one may come to interpret this as a student seems to be too much talkative. He could have just asked a simple question. Where is this Purusha with 16 parts located? This would have been enough for the teacher to know the question. But instead of saying this, he narrated the story, why he come to ask this question to the teacher. So one may tend to interpret that there are some students, even in those times also, there were students who were too much talkative. They would talk a lot, and from that we have to find out what exactly he wants to ask. So likewise here, he narrates the story and then asks the question. So here it is said, in a very jovial manner, Swamiji says that do not argue against this theory. You will then only justifying my theory. He considered himself along with others saying that we may tend to interpret like this, that the student is talkative, but that is not the case. So here the reason is being discussed further in the following paragraph. So here we have found only 2 points mainly. First, sixth query is put up in simple terms. That is one important point. Where is the Purusha located? Is the query. And secondly, why the student has narrated a story behind asking this question. So whether this story was necessary, unnecessary, he is talking too much instead of asking a bare question. So all these ideas we might have, even I also will have this idea, so don't argue against this. We are all sailing in the same boat. We feel that the student seems to be talkative. This is really the approach or presentation. You'll find some of the speakers, particularly of the spiritual discourses, they assume themselves, and from the height of the pulpit from which they are talking, they look down upon the listeners. that these are poor creatures, they don't know anything. Now it's I'm going to deliver this by which they will come to know, etc. And they invariably they close their eyes. So when you close your eyes, we don't know what's happening on the side of listeners. Here also, this kind of thing is discouraged basically. And here the Shruti wants to tell us something, suggest something significantly. But here, if we tend to interpret like this, that the student appears to be talkative, then let us wait, be patient, and see what could be the significance. So let us discuss, let us find out what could be the significance of this. Swamiji does not assume himself to be the authority. He goes along with the listeners, say, let us do this. We all think like this. I am also with you. With this he starts, but then by the time he explains the significances and all that, then the listener comes to know that this is all right to be along with the listeners, but finally he has doled out whatever is the exact answer and significance, and by virtue of this presentation, he gets the higher pedestal of respect or honor. Not assumed one, but it is in appreciation of his way of presentation. He does not assume himself to be something different than the listeners, something special, but he uses the word we instead of you. He doesn't say you should do this, you may know this, etc. But he includes himself also along with that and says use this pronoun as we. So this we really takes the listeners in more intimacy with the speaker. They are more attentively available to the speaker. And now he will be discussing the exact significance of narrating the story behind the question, before the question. So we'll go to the second paragraph. Shall we go to the second paragraph? Okay, now we'll go to the second paragraph. However, the main justification for this report of the circumstantial fact is to bring out the necessary qualifications of a true Vedantic seeker. The Rajkumar of Kosala, necessarily a great patron by birth and status, visits the ashram of Sukesha for satsanga. When he asks the sadhu what exactly is the meaning of the 16 Kala Purusha, there is no hesitation in the mind of the spiritual seeker, in the ascetic, to admit plainly his own ignorance of it. So the last statement is important. There is no hesitation in the mind of the spiritual seeker, in the ascetic, to admit plainly his own ignorance of it. So it is the beginning, it is not over. Here, in narrating the story, by the student who is asking the sixth question, he says that one prince came to my ashram, the satsang was going on, he attended the satsang, and at the end he asked the question. So when he asked the question, he said, I do not know about that Purusha. So this is the last sentence is indicative that he has no hesitation in saying that I don't know. He is the, you can say, the chief of this ashram who is conducting satsanga. And when somebody asks the question, he says, no, this I don't know. So the prince took it differently. He thought, how is it? It's not possible that he doesn't know. He is hiding from me something. So he asked again and again. So that we'll discuss later as the commentary proceeds. But here the teacher, the acharya, and here it's indicated by the term ascetic. He himself has not concluded on himself. He still considers as a spiritual seeker because he has not become the last word in spirituality, and that is Parabrahman. He has not yet realized Parabrahman, but for all practical purposes, he is the chief of the ashram or his ashram. And after the satsanga, he at the end of it, he asked the question. So when he asked the question, then he said without hesitation that he doesn't know. Now this is the answer given by the student here who is asking the sixth question. Now further analysis we will find in third paragraph. A true seeker of knowledge must be ready to own his ignorance. And yet, how few of us can stand against the self-insulting challenge of acknowledging the not known. These are the days even when an ignorant would try to look wise and a simulated smile of wisdom. With a simulated smile of wisdom. To cover ignorance with a look of wisdom seems to be the trademark of Pandits in these days of competition and rivalry. Without hesitation, Sukesha owned up his ignorance. So he's compared what the others would have done ordinarily. They would have posed themselves to be wise and knowing everything. They would hide their ignorance and give some answer by which he will be taken care of. The student will be put off by giving some explanation. So he can give anything. We do not know what he could give. We need not imagine also. But to pose as if you know is acting. He doesn't know what he poses as if he knows. And by that, he may give some comment on that question without really answering it. So this is not what Sukesha did. He plainly said that he doesn't know. Here, therefore, there's a slight criticism on those fake teachers or those who assume to be the men of self-perfection. As such, they are ignorant. But see, the description, Swamiji's literature, it's really a polished or ornamental English, we can say. That is a simulating smile. Simulating smile, he must have observed how the wise people behave, how they smile, how they talk. He's just imitating that. So a simulating smile. So as a wise man would smile, he would smile. Then keep quiet. Then look at him with certain vision. So that the student may feel ashamed for having asked that question and will go away. So it may be too ordinary question for this teacher to answer. The way he will look like that and hide his ignorance. See, this is what is really opened up here, and it is laughed at. So the competition and rivalry, whether you know more or I know more, and this kind of rivalry which is normally going on with panditas or scholars. The one Subhashita says that the poor people have no time to think about these good thoughts, noble thoughts and all that. They have to fight, struggle for 2 square meals a day. They cannot no time. They are busy elsewhere in other fields, minting money. And now if you see those who are intelligent, those who are bodharaha, that is the term used in Subhashita. Bodharo matsaragrastaha. So those who are supposed to be scholars, etc., knowledgeable people, they are having a sense of enmity. Here it is said a rivalry, a sense of rivalry, matsara, they hating, malice, all these ideas they will entertain regarding the other scholars. So this kind of competitive spirits with rivalry and here the term used here is uh, competition and rivalry. These terms. So bodharo matsaragrastaha. Then finally, what is the result? Jirnamange subhashitam. Therefore, that good thought remains as it is without any support. The poor had no time, no patience, not available to listen to that good thought. The rich have no time, and those who are having this knowledge, which are called intelligent people, they have rivalries among themselves. We'll see after stating certain by any scholar, when he states about some statement about their knowledge, and then it will be followed by a typical statement. There is a difference of opinion among the scholars. Anything he says, he will say as his opinion, and they will with a mention that there is a difference of opinion among the scholars. So this is how they try to maintain that what I know is different, what they know is different. There is a difference of opinion on this same issue. So likewise, we find that those who are intelligent and scholars, they are not doing justice to these good noble thoughts, Subhashitam. So the Subhashitam remains like a dilapidated fellow, Jirnamange Subhashitam. So the Subhashitam remains as not available for the students to understand. Nobody is available for to handle that Subhashita and explain because of this. Therefore, the scholars are criticized here, and if they don't know, they will pose as if they know, hide their ignorance, and this is being laughed at in this third paragraph. So, without the fourth paragraph, in the third paragraph, we saw that to cover the ignorance with a look of wisdom seems to be the trademark of Pandit. So these generally scholars, etc., they may hide their ignorance. But here Sukesha plainly said he doesn't know. Whatever that prince asked the question, he didn't know that. Continuing this, because it is the issue of owning the ignorance and hiding the ignorance is important for our understanding. So we'll see the point continues in fourth paragraph. Herein we have also the dramatic beauty of the Upanishadic literature clearly brought out. The prosaic Upanishadic discussion, dry philosophy, is no excuse for the rishis to ignore a dramatic situation. They exploit it to the maximum. Irresistible is the charm of art to those who have perfected it in themselves. Physical uncleanliness, mental confusions, or intellectual slovenliness, meanness in the behavior, and lowness in the thoughts or grossness in ideas, none of this can even come from one whose heart is dancing in unison with the rhythm of the unity in diversity. Thus, we find that even the casual thought of the perfected masters have a scriptural style of their own, though he is unconscious of it. A casual glance through quotations from the Bible or Quran, the Gita or the Upanishads, the words of the Buddha or declarations of Ramakrishna, the lectures of Vivekananda or the talks of Ramana, the writings of Aurobindo or songs of Meera will clearly show that when the mind is divinely composed and is resting in God consciousness, words gain a clear ring of sincerity and the construction gains a brilliance of its own. Thus, though not written as drama, the Upanishads here open with a description wherein all the dramatic possibilities have been carefully exploited. To know this paragraph now, this is a bit of paragraph with deeper significances. Before we go into this para, we need to handle this point of ignorance. One who is ignorant, there are two possibilities. He says, if he is ignorant, he says he doesn't know. And the other possibility, he says, I know, in spite of the fact he doesn't know. Now, one Arabian proverb is dealing with this idea. One is, one knows or one doesn't know, one level. And second level is whether one is conscious that one doesn't know, whether one is conscious that he knows. Depending on these two levels and two types of knowledge and ignorance, there are four types of people. And the proverb goes like this: he who does not know and does not know that he does not know is a fool. He who does not know and does not know that he does not know is a fool. Shun him. Shun his company. Then one who does not know and knows that he does not know is a simpleton. Simpleton means Arjuna. Very simple minded. Teach him. That is a suggestion. Earlier fellow should be shunned from our company. And this one who knows that he doesn't know is a simpleton. Teach him. Now the next set. One who knows and does not know that he knows is asleep. Wake him. One who knows and does not know that he knows is asleep. We have got a case for that also. He is asleep, so wake him. And lastly, one who knows and knows that he knows is a master. Follow him. So this is the thing. Now, the case that we are discussing here is about Sukesha. He knows that he doesn't know. And therefore he says that I don't know. Accepting his ignorance is the beginning of learning. Accepting that you don't know is the beginning of learning. If so, many times we come across also the cases where in a satsang, some members ask questions, not our members. In general satsang, I'm saying, some members ask questions, and they ask with already some presentation like this. As such, I know the answer, but I just want to confirm with you. Therefore, he's asking the question. I mean, he doesn't explain that he doesn't know. He said he knows it already. Now he just wants to confirm from the teacher whether this is the correct answer. So he asks the question. He doesn't say this in the beginning. He will ask the question. Then teacher with all sincerity will explain him. And finally he'll say, yes, I knew that answer, but I just wanted to confirm. So if this is the attitude, he will never learn in life. If you want, that means you don't want to show that you didn't know. You had a question and you are posing that you know the answer and you just wanted to confirm. These are the kind of people, members that there are in satsanga. Sometimes we come across. So first, the attitude of a student should be that he must appreciate that he is ignorant. He doesn't know. Then only the knowing possibility is there with him. If he does not accept that he doesn't know, then he is considered as fool. The fool is otherwise in English called as idiot, and in our vernacular is called murkha or adani. That he doesn't know that he doesn't know. Therefore, he will always pose that he knows everything. As such, he doesn't know anything, but he will pose like that and talk. Therefore, such people are fools and we should give up their company. Whereas the second one, who does not know but knows that he does not know, is a simpleton. Simpleton is like Arjuna. Arjuna, the word Arjuna means Rujutvat Arjuna. Ruju is a simpleton. If he is confused, he told the Lord, oh Lord, I am confused. I don't know now what decision I should take, whether I should fight or I should not fight. This kind of simple presentation of what is in his mind, whatever is in his mind, he spoke it out immediately to his friend. So this idea is about simpleton. It is a characteristic of a good student, that who knows in the heart of heart that he doesn't know, and therefore he has come for learning. So learning is possible only for those who accept that they don't know. So this is the main idea here, the simple. And the third case is in terms of knowledge. One who knows and doesn't know that he knows. We have a case of Hanuman in Ramayanam, who has buddhimatam varishtam. He has knowledge, he has awareness of his capacities, about his prowess, powers, etc. But he does not know. Meaning he does not keep reminding himself, or he is not conscious of it. So when it comes to crossing the ocean, all the other people were discussing with their prince or leader how to cross or who will cross how much. So all come to finally, they come to one person who said that I will cross the Lanka, all right, 100 yojanas, but I won't have capacity to come back. So when we say finally the answer is that no one can go and find out Sita, locate her and come back. Then suddenly their attention was drawn towards Maruti, Hanuman, who was doing japa, was chanting the Lord's name. And suddenly they remember, oh, we have forgotten this man. He can do that. Therefore they went to him and praised him that, oh Hanuman, at the time of birth, you rushed, flew towards the sun, and this is your capacity. What is there for you to go to Lanka and come back? You can do that. And reminding this event at the time of his birth, when he was recalled, then he immediately, all the powers started manifesting in him, and then he posed for taking off from that shore to Lanka. So there are some cases where they know it, but they are not aware of their capacity. Somebody has to awaken them and remind them of their capacity, and then they will then be full with that capacity. So this is the third case. And the fourth case is the mastermind who knows and is very much confident about it because he has gone through those experiences as well. So therefore he is a master and we should follow him. So the first two aspects tell us what makes a good student and bad student. And the last two aspects tell us who is a really wise man and who is the wise man in potential, but is not aware of it, his potentiality. So with this, in spirituality, in the transactional words, we leave it to every individual whether he should pose as he knows or he doesn't know. Depends upon what he is transacting with. But in spirituality, it is definitely the first requirement is to own your ignorance. Don't hide it. Say it openly. Therefore, Sukesha did not know about this Purusha with 16 parts and he narrated the story. See, in the satsang itself, he openly said to that prince that he doesn't know about this Purusha. He has not so far heard. And then the prince doubted about it. How can it be the master saying he doesn't know? It's not possible. He may not want to share that knowledge with the prince. Therefore, he may be saying. Then the mantra says, in translation we have seen, why should I talk lie? I've heard from the scriptures that those who talk lie, those who don't speak the truth, they like a tree who gets dried from root to the branches throughout and dies. The person will be having that fate who talks lie. So he knows this. I don't want to face that Lord. Therefore, I told you that I don't know. So, seeing this, at the heart of heart, the prince did not agree. Therefore, he kept silent and walked away from that ashram. He went back. He went back to his chariot and drove away from the scene. So, this is the case. Therefore, sir, now I want to know who is this Purusha with 16 parts? See, this sincerity with which the student asks the question indicates to him that he has owned up his ignorance about it. He has narrated the actual story to say that even when all other students are present and satsang is going on, he attended that, and at the end of it, he asked the question, and the Acharya says he doesn't know. So, this kind of sincerity about our ignorance to own up that is required so that the teacher is pleased to give the knowledge to that student. So this aspect was a very important aspect in these first two paragraphs that we read. And now we come to the very important paragraph, which is loaded with significances, with very many statements that are there in the fourth paragraph. So second and third paragraph talked about owning up the ignorance. And now the fourth paragraph, which we have read already, here the first important statement in the paragraph is, irresistible is the charm of art to those who have perfected it in themselves. This is an important statement. And before that, it was said that herein we have the dramatic beauty of Upanishadic literature clearly brought out. So dramatic beauty means the sixth query begins with the story by the student and looks like drama in a sense. Ordinarily, there's that student only once asks the question and then the rest of the time the teacher will explain it, expound it in details. This is a normal thing. But here it starts with the story, and it is not the imagined story, it is the story narrated by the student himself, what has happened in his life before and what made him ask this question here. So this story has been fully capitalized by Shruti, indicating thereby that we appreciate such students who own up their ignorance. They say that they don't know, so that they are all the more qualified to be taught by the teacher. So this we have already seen in the paragraph, earlier paragraphs. Now we are seeing here the word art is important. It says irresistible is the charm of art to those who have perfected it in themselves. Perfected it, the art, in themselves. So the word art is very, very important. There are three types of people who serve the society. The scientists, the artists, and the philosophers. Three types of people really serve the society. Rest all either help him in their task or they are not concerned about it. They are only consumers. In society, we have more consumers than producers. Majority of us are consumers only. We know only what is that, eat, drink, etc. That is going on. We consume so many things, but we don't produce anything out of that, something constructive or useful for the society. So here, these three types of people serve the society. The scientists discover the phenomenal nature, phenomenal forces, energies, powers, and they try to tame those forces and try to make them serve the humanity. So all the phenomenal powers are now to some extent controlled, tapped, and is being made use of in our day-to-day life. The applicability of their research, etc., has helped us raise the standard of living. The amenities, the facility of transport, the system of distribution, the techniques of production, all these are the, you can say, the applications or the benefits of this science and scientific research. So these scientists, in one way, they discover the secrets of the phenomenal powers by studying them, discovering them, studying them, trying to tame them so that they can make use of them for the purpose, for our purpose. And thus, they pave the way for improving the standard of living. So then the materialism or the secularism believes that if the world is improved, man should be happy. That is what their contention is. The materialism says, and it makes use of the discoveries made by scientists, economists, and politicians. These are all three scientists in the material field. They think they are all working for the prosperity of the society, supposed to work. Politics we use in a bad sense, but it is a science basically of relationship with the people. The politician knows how to get the votes from the poor and get the donations from the rich people, and both of them keep right relationships. Yeah, it is a science. Politics is another science. Similarly, the social workers who are working in the society. So economists who discover the sources of energy and economize them for the use of the humanity, used by the humanity. Thus, all the three types, the scientists, the economists, and the politicians, they work for the betterment of the outer world, and the secularism prompted by them tells us that if the world is improved, man should be happy. But this is far away from the fact. There are, at this moment, even those who are rolling in luxury, who have all the comforts and luxury at their beck and call, who are living actually in luxury, they are comfortably miserable. Ordinary man is miserable, poor fellow. He may be a little better person who is composed and who can afford to live in his hut also, and he can sleep peacefully. But this man with riches and luxuries has not the bother. He cannot sleep peacefully. He has a bother about his property, about his money, etc. So one thing is, ordinarily, a person who goes to work every day, okay, during the month, he goes to work carefree. He travels because he takes the limited amount of money, whatever is bare minimum required for his that day, takes. But watch him when he gets the salary packet. And nowadays, all the salaries are directly credited in our account. But consider him carrying the cash at home. So he has now more money than what he normally has every day. On the salary day, he has a packet. Now see how his mentality changes. Every time when he enters, he will see where to sit. He will see who are the other passengers around him, and he will take a seat and always watch who is doing what, etc. Because he wants to keep his money in his own pocket. He doesn't want somebody else to loot that. So the moment a little extra money and our mentality changes. So those who are really in luxury comforts and luxury levels, they are not free from their mental tortures, their mental worries, anxieties, their cases of depressions and various mental psychological ills. They are not free from that. Only a betterment in the outer world cannot make the man happy. It can only satisfy. If we were animals, perhaps it would have satisfied us, because it will only satisfy some physical demands in our life. But we have a mind and we have an intellect. So we want mental satisfaction. We want intellectual perfection. We are not just happy with a little better food and better clothes and better shelter and better surroundings and all that. So it is not enough that we are provided with this material prosperity that we can be happy. It requires mental satisfaction. It requires the intellectual noble ideas who can lead us to perfection, etc. So this being the case, the materialism has failed in making the man happy. So this is not sufficient. We also need the science that will help us how to train our mind, how to tame our mind, how to make the mind think some creative thoughts, some noble thoughts, how it can be led to the higher ways of living, how it can be freed from all its modifications like different agitations, worries, anxieties, etc. This is what is important. Similarly, also the pursuit of knowledge that makes the man really as a human. Because he is a thinking being, he needs to know, he must keep learning, he must keep the equipment in action and try to learn the knowledge. Therefore, this merely providing him the material needs does not complete or answers all the demands of our human life. They only cater to the physical demand. But our psychological and intellectual demands cannot be fulfilled by materialism. And there, the importance of the spiritual pursuit is will be highlighted here. We were talking about the art. So the scientists have only improved the standard of living, but it has not helped the man to feel a happier being. So now here the next one, the artist, whether he is a painter, whether he is a singer, any art that he has developed in him, when he presents that art, he himself enjoys the art, and incidentally, this joy from his art is shared with all those who participate in it, who are the recipients of that. So whether it is a song or performance of any art, those who are spectators or listeners, they also get the share of joy. Basically, the artist himself is with joy. He gets the joy out of playing that, or by performing of that art. He gets the joy, and he also shares that with others. So what this art really contributes to man, to get him the pure happiness or pure joy. It is really the quality of joy that he gains from this artist is really superb, and they feel satisfied with that performance. So to that extent, so long as the artist is performing, the others who receive the joy of that from the artist, they are also benefited. This is one. But the art has got a wider scope here. You will find in our literature, in Swamiji's literature, there are some books whose titles have the one word art, if you remember. The first book, Kindle Life, the starting portion is entitled as The Art of Living. So living is an art. It's not the technique or a science. It is an art. How to live happily in the world, how to live with a mind balanced and undergoing hectic activities, it is an art. We have to cultivate that art. When you say art, it has to be cultivated. Art of living. Then the art of contemplation. There's a book, another booklet entitled as The Art of Contemplation. Then we have for the Yuva Chaitanya members, we have a text which is Art of Man Making. Now these are actually, the contents are only Gita talks, but they are addressed exclusively to the youngsters. Gita talks to the youngsters are compiled. They were radio talks, and unfortunately, in the parliament, a casual question, who is the highest paid artist on All India Radio? And came the answer, Swami Chinmayananda. And everybody was astonished. What is this? Because these talks were being delivered regularly twice in a week on All India Radio. All these Gita talks. And they had a good popularity. But the question in the secularism was raised and said, how the hell these Hindus are paid so much in the name of art, etc., in the name of talks? How can he pay for that? And the parliament has discontinued his talks from the radio. See this is secularism. So-called secularism is this, that they have dubbed the Gita as a religious textbook. And so to allow a person of one religion and to allow him this our platform and to broadcast his talks is too much. It should not be accepted, and it was rejected. So suddenly it was discontinued, and then the Swamiji has continued to record those talks and gave the title The Art of Man Making. Now this art of man making has also got a reference of Swami Vivekananda, whose motto was nation building through man making. That was his motto. Same thing is followed here. That Gita is the text which will make the man as human. So man making task is done by the Gita knowledge, and therefore that should be taught to middle school onwards to all students in the school curriculum also. So this was the idea, art of man making, art of contemplation, art of living. So this, if we see, all these arts are to be cultivated. They are not available, they cannot be directly given. They may be taught, but finally one has to cultivate in him that skill related to the art. So this art is a very important thing. Now, the next question is, here the sentence says that irresistible is the charm of art to those who have perfected it in themselves. Now, this is related to the man of realization who have self-perfection, and even the self-perfection itself is an art, the art of self-perfection. So it is not just the, say, a drawing, a painting, or a music, dance, not that kind of art. It begins with that art and it ends with the art of self-perfection, art of mental control. Mental control is also, mental development is an also art. The Swamiji has said the art of mental control, where Ramdas Swami has said as Manojaya. For Manase Shlok, he has given the title Manojaya. How to win the mind, how to rule over the mind. But Swamiji has said this is an art of mental control. So this is something handling with a skill, and it is not just going by the theory or going by the practice, but in between the art has to be cultivated. So this word art is very important. It is the starting of the uh, the highest men that serve the humanity are philosophers. Why? Because the artist himself first enjoys the art, and the joy is incidentally passed on to the those who want to share that, who are the listeners. But philosophers tell each one of us how to be happy with oneself. You don't need even the art also for your entertainment and happiness. How to discover the joy, the bliss in ourselves. This is an art of self-perfection. And those who are perfected, this is the term used here, those who have perfected in it means in the art. So perfection is also an art, the art of self-perfection. So those masters who are the masters of self-perfection, they know it, what is this art. So art and philosophy, if art gives the joy to others, the artist gives the joy to others, the philosopher tells everyone how he can himself becomes what? Full of bliss. How he himself can own up bliss as his nature. This is a great achievement of philosopher. So in a rising grade, we can say the scientists also serve the society, the artists also serve the society, the philosophers also serve the society, but the philosophers are highest in a sense, not only that they have themselves established in the joy, but they teach others how others can also discover in themselves this source of joy. This is the most important thing. And in all there are various, there's a very good scope on uh, reflecting upon these statements. This is one of the statements. So let us see if any more statements we find in this. So the first important statement we saw is irresistible is the charm of art to those who have perfected it in themselves. Physical uncleanliness, etc., is the description of none of these can even come from one whose heart is dancing in unison with the rhythm of the unity in diversity. The man of perfection is described further. Not only that he is established in the joy, not only that he gives the secret of how to discover the joy in oneself and gives it to all, but here it is that he is not of that type where the description goes physical uncleanliness, mental confusions, or intellectual slovenliness. I had to see this in dictionary, meaning of slovenliness, meanness in behavior, or lowness in thought, or grossness in idea. None of these can even come from one whose heart is dancing in unison with the rhythm of the unity in diversity. Unity in diversity is the point. Those who have discovered the unity in spite of diversity, variety, and multiplicity of the creation, who have discovered a unique principle of pure consciousness pervading all these names and forms, that is unity in diversity. They, in spite of diversity, they see the unity, meaning the one principle of pure consciousness spread and pervading our entire multiplicity and variety of this world. So those who have seen this, the unity in diversity, for them it is definitely they are free from all those negativities and who whose heart is dancing in unison with the rhythm of unity. So there's a rhythm going on. The rhythm also is the word used in art for the music. There is a rhythm, there is a melody, there are lilting tunes. So these are the words used in the art, in a music, art of music. So here when word uses rhythm, with reference to unity in diversity, they can clearly see that a music of life is going on in the entire world, like an orchestra. In the orchestra, there are so many instruments, and one singer is singing the song and is accompanied with so many instruments, different instruments of different kind. But when we say orchestra, all of them sing one song. The tabla will be in tune with that song. The harmonium will be in tune with that. All the instruments will be in tune with, in harmony with the total music and the same song. Similarly, in the entire creation, it's an orchestra going on, and each one, like from birds onwards, birds, plants, animals, each one is, you can say, handling an instrument or singing a song in his own way. But there is a perfect harmony between the minerals, plants, and animals, birds and animals. But we don't find that in humanity. That kind of harmony we don't find. To bring that harmony in the humanity and to make them tune with the universal harmony in the world, universe, is the job of philosopher. And those men of perfection, they clearly see this music. The rhythm they see means basically the music that is going on they see in the entire vicinity. And thus they appreciate that there is a common song. We have in literature one phrase saying that to discover one's own note in a song, different notes. Once you discover your note in life, then you appreciate the common song that is going on in the surroundings and you join them in harmony and join your instruments. Sometimes we see that in the orchestra, one instrumentalist who is playing on tabla, he shows extra skills and then that looks out of harmony. The people's attention may go there, but they will not appreciate that. All instruments should be in harmony with the song. Similarly, here the entire song of life is going on in the universe, and each member of the universe is contributing his best to whatever note he is provided or whatever tune is provided. He sings with that, joins in harmony with the total music. Only man needs to know how to live in harmony with the surroundings. And for that, our these masters of self-perfection give us that kind of, the word used here is, particular word used, rhythm. They tell us the rhythm. They teach us the rhythm. When we pick up that, we come to appreciate the music that is going on throughout. And that helps us bring not only the happiness within ourselves, but then we become the source of happiness for all others, the surrounding. This we will stop here. We'll continue our discussions. This paragraph is loaded with statements which have a deeper significances. Here the word art we tried to discuss on various aspects of art. Now we'll conclude. I believe there are no announcements for the time being immediately. So our overdue program of bi-monthly congregation